Good evening and welcome everyone. Thank you all very much for coming and continuing this wonderful tradition of the annual meeting. As the chair, it is my privilege to call to order this, the 127th annual meeting of the Trustees of Reservations. As we do each year, we gather as friends and members of governance to continue the great work and continue to pursue our mission as an organization to preserve for public use and enjoyment properties of exceptional scenic, historic, and ecological value. Tonight, we will review some great successes that we've had over the course of the year. We will also honor some tremendous, wonderful people who've been very impactful and supportive of this organization. I look forward to that. I also want to thank State Street Global Research for helping and supporting and underwriting part of the cost of this fine event. And next, I want to ask Buzz Constable, the Secretary of the Board of Directors, to officially open our annual meeting.
Thank you for changing the page. Good evening, everybody. I'm Buzz Constable, and as Secretary of the Board of Directors, it is my pleasure to declare that we have a quorum present for the 127th annual meeting of the trustees. May I have a motion to waive a reading of the minutes of the 126th? I only heard seconds. I only heard motions. Can I hear a second? Thank you very much. All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? Hearing none. It's a vote. Thank you very much. Peter, I turn the talk back to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Buzz. And now, I would ask Amy Auerbach, the Chair of the Finance and Audit Committee, to report on our finances.
Thank you, Peter. Chairman and Governance, I am pleased to report on this year's financial health. A little shorter. For the 6th year in a row, operating revenues continue to increase. In fiscal year 2018, operating revenue reached $35 million, and you can see from this chart that we are budgeting continued growth for our current fiscal year. This extraordinary progress can in part be explained by the integration of new iconic properties, but it is also a direct result of creating and providing new and additional services and products to traditional sources of income. We have the staff to thank for that. Our long-term financial objective is to maintain a healthy mix of earned revenue, contributed income, and a draw from the endowment, all which will support our overarching strategy of sustaining a break-even budget each year. As we drill down into the revenue details, you will note that we continue to grow a healthy, sustainable, and diverse number of earned income revenue streams, such as our public programs, CSAs, admission fees, and an ever-increasing membership base. We now have more than 140,000 members, quite remarkable, and evidence of the tremendous value that the organization provides to families and individuals. Here is a snapshot of our fiscal 2018 expenses. Property and resource stewardship and all other program services such as land conservation, cultural resources, and agriculture continue to constitute the largest share of our expenditures at more than half of all spending. As compared to last year, spending in support of visitor amenities and engagement increased, offset by decreases in spending for supporting services. Finally, While it is common to focus on the operating budget when analyzing a company's financial health, equally important is a review of the balance sheet. Here you see a snapshot of our financial position at the end of fiscal year 2018, with total assets of $301 million, including over $166 million in investments. With zero debt and liabilities of only $5 million, the trustees have a combined net assets of $296 million, a measure of significant strength and a source of great market power. Chairman, I submit this report for the record and ask for a motion to accept the Chair of the Finance and Audit Committee's report. Is there a second? All approved? Thank you. This report has been submitted to the meeting minutes.
Thank you, Amy, for reporting on our very sound financial health, and thank you for your careful oversight and good judgment and management of these affairs and the committee as well. And we are blessed that many of who came before have given us this very sound financial condition. So with that, we will now have a brief break before we come back to recognize some for their service. Thanks. Each year, we recognize and honor retiring members of the Board of Directors for their exceptional and long service. These devoted, trusted members of governance give their time and support and energy to the trustees, and for all of that, we are very grateful. This year, we have 2 retiring members of the board, and I would first like to recognize Amy Auerbach.
I'm Nisi Panetta, Vice Chair of the Board of Directors, and it's my honor to thank Amy Auerbach for her years of service to the trustees. Amy Auerbach came to the trustees in 2007 through our affiliation with Boston Natural Areas Network. Amy played an important role at BNAN over the years, partnering with founder Jeannie Beal to provide key financial support and guidance. When BNAN became part of the trustees, her work with both organizations deepened and expanded. Amy was an outstanding treasurer of the board for many years, building financial strength in the wake of the great financial crisis. Amy served on the recently formed Boston Committee to ensure that BNAN's legacy and the legacy of Jeannie Beal remain vital and relevant to the trustees. Amy worked closely with 2 different CFOs over the years, always available for coffee and conversation to work through issues and opportunities facing the organization. In our board deliberations, Amy has consistently brought her insight as a nonprofit executive to help us support our staff and build a sense of shared mission. Amy has always answered the call, and the call has come often, to serve on key task forces like strategic enterprise, merger opportunities, and the important selection committees for Barbara Erickson and more recently CFO Ann Tikkanen. Amy's understanding that just a fraction of an acre can bring joy and meaning to the lives of urban dwellers has informed our approach to newer initiatives like the Boston Public Market and the Boston Waterfront Initiative. Amy has always been risk-aware, but not risk-averse, thoughtful and kind to staff, and devoted to our mission. We're delighted that she will continue on the Finance and Boston committees and that she will step up to be Vice Chair of the Chairman's Council. Amy, heartfelt thanks for your years of service and for your friendship. We look forward to your continued involvement with the trustees for many years to come.
Congratulations, Amy. Will you please stand and be recognized? And now I would like to recognize David Foster.
It's my honor to recognize David Foster, who has served his full 3 terms on the Trustees Board. When I first asked David to join the board, he said, David, I want to make sure, are we really going to do stuff? Are we going to get stuff done? Or is this going to be more of, we'll take care of these 100 properties and not change a lot? And I said, David, I don't think you'll ever find we're going to have a dull moment. We are going to plow new ground over the next 10 years. As a conservation organization, we've been extremely fortunate to have someone of David's stature on our board. He is one of the nation's foremost experts on and advocates for the environment. He is an evolutionary biology professor at Harvard, where he has headed up the Harvard Forest for the past 28 years. Harvard Forest is a 4,000-acre ecology laboratory and classroom in central Massachusetts that's part of the Harvard curriculum. What could be a better board member for TTOR? More recently, David has been particularly focused on climate change, human activity, and natural disturbances. And David is a true expert, therefore, in the most important conservation challenges of our time. Among his many accomplishments, David has been a driving force on creating wildlands and woodlands, a science-based conservation vision for the New England landscape, which dealt with how to control sprawl and prevent overdevelopment. And we honored him for this with the Charles Eliot Award in 2010. He also has more recently led a study on the role that agriculture can play in managing landscape health. David spends a lot of time on Martha's Vineyard, where he does research, including on our many properties out there. And he recently put that research together in a book called A Meeting of Land and Sea, The Nature and Future of Martha's Vineyard and How It Can Be Protected. David serves on our agricultural committee, on our Martha's Vineyard advisory group, and these made him perfect member of the Farm Institute Task Force that oversaw the acquisition of that important educational agricultural property that we now own on the vineyard. He also served as Barbara's early advisor on coastal erosion policies when deciding whether to fortify or let nature take its course. He was an early believer in developing our coastal strategy and our Boston waterfront strategy, which are now critical components of our new strategic plan. David, your service was outstanding, and we are delighted that you've agreed to now serve on our Chairman's Council while also continuing to serve on the Agricultural Committee and the Martha's Vineyard Advisory Group, so that we will be able to have the benefit of your incredible wisdom going forward. David, for everything that you've done, we are very deeply grateful.
Congratulations, David. Thank you. It has been great to have them on the board, both David and Amy, and I really want to thank you for your years of service to the trustees. Can we have one more round of applause for David and Amy? And now I would like to invite Nisi Panetta, Vice Chair of the Trustees Board of Directors, to come to the stage and present the Proxy package for voting members' approval.
Thank you, Peter, and good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Governance and Nominating Committee, I'm pleased to present the following for approval by our voting members, you, the dream team assembled here tonight. Each year, members of the Governance and Nominating Committees devote hours to identifying and recruiting the very best new people to nominate for leadership roles and to reviewing current governance members who are up for renomination. We're very proud of the excellent slate we have before you. For the Board of Directors, we have 4 new nominations, each serving 1 3-year term. Laura DeBonis, Phil Edmondson, Marty Lempress, and Phyllis Yale. You can learn more about them in your packet. For the Advisory Board, we have 19 new nominations, each serving one 3-year term. Michelle Abel, Margaret Bailey, George Beale, John Gibson Carey, Richard Kaufman, Cecily Colburn, Karen Conway, Jade Gedeon, Trevor Graham, Leslie Hammond, James Hammonds, Christopher Hart, Robert Larson, Janet Offensend, Jonathan Pourvu, Carter Romansky, Bradford Wakeman, Andrew West, and Janet Zwanziger. For the Chairman's Council, we have 6 new nominations, each serving one 3-year term. Amy Auerbach, Laura Bibler, James Ellard Jr., David Foster, Nathan Hayward, and Russell Piotr. For corporate trustees, we have 25 new nominations, each serving one 3-year term. You'll find a listing of the members of governance who have been renominated for terms of 3 years in the program book you have before you. So you can review those at your leisure. Are there any other nominations from the floor? May I have a motion to instruct the secretary to accept the slate as a single vote for approval? Second? All in favor? Congratulations to all who have been elected, and we thank you so much for your service to the trustees.
Thank you, Nisi, for your attention to all these important governance issues, and welcome to our new members of governance. I also want to thank Brian Kinney, the chair of the Governance Committee, and Clem Benenson, the chair of the Nominating Committee, as well as the members of those 2 committees for overseeing this process and for putting together such a great slate of newcomers. It is very heartening, and I think it bodes well for this organization that we continue to attract such a high caliber and quality of people. And Clem and Brian have done a great job overseeing this important part of the governance cycle. Now, on occasion, we invite those individuals who have given exceptional service and support to the organization to become Life Trustees. This is one of the highest honors of the trustees. At this time, I would like to recognize Nathan Hayward and David Scudder for their exemplary service to the trustees, and we are so pleased that they have agreed to become Life Trustees.
We're so thrilled that David Scudder and Nathan Hayward are our 2018 Life Trustees. Both of these individuals have served the statewide organization, but their stories really start with one of our most iconic sites, Castle Hill. David, starting in the 60s with the Castle Hill Music Foundation, creating the music legacy there that's still going strong. Nathan Hayward, 50 years later, leading the charge to restore one of its most iconic features, the Grand Allée, which then gave rise to the transformation of the casino, the Italianate Garden, and much more. Both Nathan and David have helped create Castle Hill into one of the flagships of the organization. Their service has been extraordinary, and the organization has benefited greatly, not only at Castle Hill, but in the key communities of the North Shore and the Berkshires. Each in his own way has not only been committed to Castle Hill, ensuring that it continues to be a flagship of the trustees, but also these ideas statewide. Nathan, with his incredible leadership in the Berkshires, and David Scudder in the North Shore have helped lift up many properties and efforts of the trustees, serving the organization over many decades. Both Nathan and David got involved with the organization at different times in its history, but there is a similarity and a coincidence there. They both come with great assertiveness, ideas, but also a real love and passion that shines through in all of their recommendations and work. They've served on a number of committees between the two of them. They have helped rally others when the trustees has really needed it, and they have been quiet and humble servants behind the scenes, helping serve the greater good. We're very excited that Nathan and David are becoming Life Trustees together at the same time. Both of their efforts have provided two pivotal points in Castle Hill's history. With David, the creation of the Castle Hill Foundation, which created the music legacy and this idea of programming and activation of Castle Hill, which lives on and thrives. And Nathan, with the restoration of the Grand Allée, a nationally recognized landscape restoration that really gave the organization confidence that it could take on these big ambitions and really make this place sing. Together, they've not only ensured that Castle Hill has been a top priority of the trustees over the decades, but that it has even a brighter future going forward. On behalf of the Board of Directors, the staff of the trustees, and our volunteer force statewide, thank you, David and Nathan, for your incredible service. We are so thrilled to honor you as Life Trustees.
Congratulations, Nathan and David. Would you please both stand and be recognized? Each year, we also honor an exceptional employee for going the extra mile for the organization. This year, we honor Vin Antil, GIS manager and a member of the Operations and Programs Department. Vin Antil came to the trustees in 1998 from Mass Fish and Wildlife, armed with undergrad degrees in history and geography and a graduate degree in regional planning. He made it his mission to bolster the trustees' capabilities in Geographic Information System, GIS, mapping. A Swiss Army knife of standards and measurement, Vin's database work enables trustees' teams to gather and report on the data required to protect and maintain our properties. Visiting one of our historic homes, Vin built the database that helps curators track and measure temperature and humidity levels, keeping collections safe from damage. Spotted a New England cottontail, Vin created a tool to analyze the vulnerable rabbit's habitat requirements, enabling our ecology team to keep tabs on the condition of its population. Hiking our reservations, you have Vin to thank for charting the trail maps. Vin likes to say, "I have my nose in everybody's business." We wouldn't have it any other way, and we couldn't do it without him, which is why Vin Antil is the Trustees 2018 Employee of the Year. Congratulations, Vin. Would you please stand and be recognized? Volunteers are the backbone of our operations. Without these more than 2,000 individuals working 60,000 hours of volunteer work in the last year, we could not achieve such successes, nor could we have cared for so many places in such a superior way. Among these many volunteers, we choose one each year who demonstrates exemplary service, but this year, we could not choose just one. We received wonderful nominations, and there were in fact 3 individuals who stood out to us for their unique and dedicated commitment to a special place. Each of these volunteers are garden superstars. They have lovingly decided to care for and nurture one of the trustees' public gardens and have been doing so for many years. Lindsay Allison has been volunteering at MyToy on Chappaquiddick for more than 40 years. As Chris Kennedy, our stewardship manager for Martha's Vineyard, says, Lindsay is MyToy, period. She and Don Sibley rebuilt MyToy in the wake of the devastation wrought by Hurricane Bob in 1991, which had left only 3 trees standing. She is usually the first person in the garden in the morning, stops by every few hours to check the watering coverage, and is back at dusk to make sure the sprinklers are put to bed for the night. And she delights in interpreting each room within the garden for visitors, whether they are novices or experts in the world of Japanese gardens. Simply put, MyToy would not be the treasure it is without the love and care it has received over the years from Lindsay Allison. Lindsay couldn't be here tonight, but let's give her a round of applause. Our next volunteer award goes to Susan Baxter. The hours that Susan spends weeding, watering, and arranging garden beds to keep Far and Near and Shirley looking tidy start around noon and often only end when her husband comes over and around supper and says, "It's time to get home." Susan quietly devotes up to 30 hours a week to keep Far and Near in good repair. She works tirelessly to maintain and improve this special place and continuously strives to elevate the experience for our visitors, especially children. Susan's husband was an acquaintance of the late Arthur Banks, who donated his family's summer home in the Cranberry Bog to the trustees in 2012. And it was Banks' act of kindness that spurred Susan, an amateur gardener, to get involved. She says, "He made this lovely gesture, and I wanted to honor his generosity and help it along." And she has helped many, many times over. I'd like to ask Susan Baxter to stand up so that we can recognize her. Thank you, Susan, for all you do for Far and Near and for the trustees. Congratulations. Our final recipient of the Volunteer Award is Rose Grant. When the trustees began transforming the Allen C. Haskell Public Gardens in New Bedford from a neglected plant nursery to a horticultural gem, Rose Grant was one of the first to get her hands dirty. Haskell's horticulturalist, Kristen McCullen, says, "Rose is an all-star. She has cut back invasive bamboo, cleared brush, scrubbed mold from the greenhouse windows, right down to the list of unglamorous work. Rose spends Wednesday mornings from March through November each year in the garden, teaching classes and leading tours, snapping photos for the garden's Facebook page, and volunteering for nearly every event at the property. For Rose, it's all service to the citizens of New Bedford. As she explains, there's a lot of traffic and noise here, and a lot of people who live in public housing. Haskell Public Gardens is a little piece of solitude they can visit anytime, right here in the city." And now, would Rose Grant please stand so we can recognize her? Thank you, Rose, for all that you do for the Haskell Public Gardens and the trustees. Congratulations. The care and stewardship of our reservations rely on the commitment and passion of these volunteers, like these dedicated individuals. Congratulations to all 3 of our 2018 Volunteers of the Year. Now, I would like to invite Barbara Erickson, our President and CEO, to the stage for a very special presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I have the sincere honor of presenting the 2018 Charles Eliot Award. The trustees created this honor in 1934, and since that time, our most prestigious award has been presented to many luminaries in the Commonwealth's history. At times, the honor has gone to organizations like the National Park Service on the occasion of their 100th anniversary, and in other years, dignitaries, volunteer superstars, and political leaders have been lauded, such as Frederick Law Olmsted, John D. Rockefeller, Governor Deval Patrick, and Mayor Thomas Menino. Universal is a singular grand idea of saving special places for everyone. In every case, we seek to honor not only the award recipient, but also the values, the qualities, and the principles which Charles Eliot articulated when he founded the organization. In the case of tonight's honoree, we see the portrait of a gentleman conservationist who not only does the work and in the model of Charles Eliot challenges and encourages his fellow industry leaders to do their part. He has been a champion for creating more advocates for the environment, and even tonight, I think he only agreed to be here with us because he believes it will help to advance the work. Indeed, Charles Eliot would have liked him a great deal. Tonight, we honor Amos Hostetter. Before Amos devoted his energies to protecting the environment and combating climate change, he was a pioneer in a different industry, founding Continental Cablevision. The company grew over 33 years to become the third largest, and not surprisingly, Amos was widely regarded as the cable industry's preeminent statesman, frequently representing it before Congress. In addition to running a highly successful enterprise and receiving every major industry honor during the course of his career, Amos was the youngest chairman of the National Cable Television Association. But he took greatest pride in what his industry gave back to society, be it C-SPAN or Cable in the Classroom, organizations that he helped found and whose boards he later chaired. He also took pride in bringing to market cable's multitude of programming choices and broadband technology, which now are essential parts of everyday life. An industry innovator, Continental Cablevision was the first cable company in the U.S. to provide broadband internet service to consumers. His 4+ decades of leadership in public broadcasting has likewise benefited tens of millions of Americans. But Amos's leadership was never limited to the cable industry. His volunteer engagements, which are far too many to enumerate, have been extensive, representing a high standard for civic leadership. I'll cite just one example. His affection for his alma mater, Amherst College, led him to serve on the board for 12 years, including 8 as chairman. During his tenure, the college endowment doubled from $540 million to more than $1 billion, as the college successfully completed a campaign to support a range of key activities. One of those was a new financial aid initiative that eliminated loans for a broad range of low and middle income families. Suffice it to say that Amos's business and volunteer activities have indelibly changed modern life, but he is far from through. So tonight, we are here to talk about the other Amos, the selfless lover of land, the advocate of climate action, and the civic leader focused on what's best for Boston's future. Like many of you tonight, Amos came to conservation work through a beloved piece of land and a desire to preserve the iconic and the threatened. He first became involved in land conservation through the island of Nantucket, where he not only met his wife Barbara, but where their family made a home away from Boston. His principal engagements there have revolved around the Nantucket Conservation Foundation and the Sconset Trust. He has been a member of the NCF for 4 decades and has served on the board since 1995. Amos's gifts of land to the Sconset Trust have inspired and encouraged others. such that the Trust now has over 130 acres in conservation, in addition to the iconic Sanctity Head Lighthouse. This work deepened his love of land conservation, and it was during this time that Amos would become involved with the trustees. He has served on the property committee for Cosqueda Cotu for over 4 decades and became a member of our governance in 1991. In 1997, after the sale of Continental Cablevision, Amos and Barbara formed the Barr Foundation, now one of New England's largest, and they identified conservation and the environment as a key focus area. In setting the direction for this work, Amos and Barbara turned to Andy Kendall, a former president of the trustees. Their notable investments include grants to the Charles River Watershed Association to address the effects of stormwater runoff, the Charles River Conservancy for early support of what is now the Lynch Family Skate Park, the Thompson Island Outward Bound Education Center for experiential and environmental education programs for Boston youth, and startup support for the Boston Harbor Island Alliance, now part of Boston Harbor Now. Another key grant served as a preview of the future of Barr's strategies when they supported Mass Audubon's Boston Nature Center in Mattapan with 67 acres of open space. This new center also became the first ever green municipal building in Boston. Among the earliest grants from Barr was one to the Boston Natural Areas Network, now a proud part of the trustees. Barr's investments in this case were not to buy land. Their support was to engage and organize residents so that they could become a force that advocated and leveraged public resources for the common good. The result of this effort today is 2 greenways, one along the Neponset River and another in East Boston, that provide 11 miles of walking and biking trails and over 100 acres of parks in underserved neighborhoods. Many of these grants were made in the early years of the foundation, when it chose to do its giving anonymously. But that all changed as Amos and Barbara became aware of the need to confront one of the most urgent challenges of our time, climate change. In 2010, the city of Boston released its updated climate action plan with detailed strategies. And in that same year, the Barr Foundation announced publicly a 5-year commitment of $50 million to address climate change. This would represent a major shift for the foundation as it became far more public-facing and expanded into climate issues. As part of this commitment and working alongside his friend, Mayor Tom Menino, Amos helped to conceive and launch the Green Ribbon Commission. The commission is comprised of leaders from multiple sectors: higher education, healthcare, commercial real estate, and more. This targeted approach has made the Green Ribbon Commission one of the most impactful such groups in the country because its work wasn't being carried out just by City Hall, but also in the boardrooms of Boston's major institutions. Since its inception, the Commission has promoted technologies, policies, incentives that have accelerated the reduction of emissions across multiple sectors in the city. For example, the Commission has helped large property owners develop resiliency strategies for individual buildings and infrastructure management agencies. Amos continues today as a chair of the Commission along with Mayor Walsh. His chairmanship of the Commission is typical of his leadership style: engage, inspire, and empower others, enable and support them to do their best work, and avoid the spotlight so that the machine he's set into motion can do its work uninterrupted. Amos's dedication is not just about the civic leaders. I recall one very warm evening without air conditioning in a Roxbury high school where Amos and I heard from the public on their hopes for the environment in Imagine 2030. He's always interested in all voices and perspectives. 2 weeks ago, Mayor Walsh delivered a bold and visionary address at the Chamber of Commerce focused on shaping a resilient Boston waterfront, envisioning a network of connected open space. This exciting vision would not have been possible without the years of investment by the Commission and, more importantly, Amos's longstanding leadership that informed the mayor's plans. And still, even with this focus on climate, Amos has maintained a passion for conservation. Just last year, he supported the protection of Marsh Farm, a 481-acre cranberry farm in Plymouth. I open my remarks by reflecting on Amos's success in building an industry-leading cable company. But what many may not know is that the first corporate office for this fledgling business was in the towboat building at Lewis Wharf. Amos also lived for many years in the Granite Building at one of the first abandoned warehouses converted to condos along the waterfront. Today, Amos and the foundation maintain offices in the Pilot House on Lewis Wharf, where they were one of the first waterfront property owners to incorporate access and amenities for the public to enjoy. He set an example for other property owners by providing a harbor walk segment that included native plantings, seating areas, free binoculars, exhibit space, and a water taxi dock. Advocates have long applauded these well-designed features and consider these amenities the standard by which other projects should be constructed and maintained. What is evident in reflecting upon Amos's consistent commitment and myriad contributions to conservation is that he is always oriented toward the future. This is the same passion he brings to Barr's recent waterfront work to create a vibrant, livable, and environmentally healthy city, of which Trustees is a key partner. Amos, Barbara, and the foundation are admirably focused on the next 100 years for Boston, including a thriving and resilient waterfront. His love of the Boston Harbor clearly has a deep history. I can't help but believe that his 50-year connection to the waterfront planted a seed in his mind and heart that the harbor would someday need him. Indeed, today it does. So, Amos, it is with the utmost respect and affection that I ask you now to join me on stage to add your name to our distinguished roll and receive the 2018 Charles Eliot Award.
Please.
I'm a little overwhelmed. I shouldn't say a little overwhelmed, I'm a lot overwhelmed. Thank you, Barbara, for those gracious and very expansive remarks. And my thanks to the trustees for this award. I'm humbled to find my name added to such an illustrious list of former recipients and to have it associated with the remarkable legacy of Charles Eliot. While I'm deeply grateful for this evening's recognition, I want to use the occasion to offer my gratitude to the trustees on two other fronts. First, you have enthusiastically accepted the stewardship responsibility of more than 100 special places across the Commonwealth, representing 25,000 acres of Massachusetts' most iconic landscapes and architectural statements. Quite a monumental responsibility. Thanks to the diligence of your leadership for the last century and a quarter, these properties have been rigorously maintained and will continue to both calm and inspire the public for generations to come. Simple maintenance often goes unnoticed. You deserve immense praise and thanks for what you've done to maintain these properties. Second, I want to commend the thoughtful and smart reorientation, which I think in today's words would be called a pivot, that your leadership has accomplished over the last decade, beginning with your affiliation with the Boston Natural Areas Network. You are aggressively focusing on providing opportunities for open space, recreation, and enjoyment for those living in our urban centers. This is entirely appropriate and consistent with Elliot's concern in the 1890s as the industrial age began to change the Massachusetts landscape. My wife Barbara and I are especially excited by your engagement with the Boston Waterfront and your focus on creating more accessible, welcoming, and resilient public spaces here. It is a vision now embraced by our mayor, made more urgent by the realities of climate change, and one that will continue to position the trustees as the premier steward of both our natural resources and our physical assets. We look forward to advancing this vital work in partnership with you. I am honored by this recognition and most grateful for what TTOR has done and is doing for our Commonwealth. Thank you.
The Trustees is proud to have been founded and headquartered here in our capital city, Boston, a truly world-class place to live and visit. Thinking about our waterfront, especially as an organization with 125 miles of coast under our care, we think that our waterfront can be more climate resilient, more engaging for our communities, much more vibrant and iconic design that really is emblematic of what Boston is all about. So 3 years ago, we started the One Waterfront initiative, hoping to bring iconic world-class green space to our harbor.
You know, those things, when they were built, those facilities were real outposts in the middle of a sea of parking lots. But the folks who made those commitments had a vision that the waterfront was a resource in Boston that was truly unique, and I think we're seeing the fulfillment of that. The public investment in buildings like the Institute of Contemporary Arts and the courthouse. And of course, the construction of the Harbor Walk has created open space, created public access that has dramatically changed. And then the depression of the Central Artery, you know, the planners were true visionaries when they recognized that if we put the Central Artery underground, it would truly knit the seaport back into the fabric of the traditional downtown. And I sit in my office at 125 High Street and watch it every day. The connectivity between the Fort Point Channel and the Seaport area and the financial district with the Greenway in between, which is a great public resource in and of itself, is just fabulous to watch.
The reality is that Boston's waterfront is an absolute treasure and asset for the city of Boston. The opportunity before us today is how do we ensure that we fully seize this great opportunity to take this world-class waterfront and ensure that we're fully maximizing its potential to be a place that the city comes together, its potential to protect the city related to climate resiliency, and its potential to provide great open space that people can enjoy for decades to come. The Trustees of Reservations are a critical partner in shaping a waterfront for the 21st century. They bring such deep competency in terms of stewarding and managing great open space.
We're working to create open spaces that give people the opportunity and a reason through public programming and public engagement to actually create a benefit for all Bostonians. The trustees aren't going to be able to do this alone. We really see ourselves as a strategic partner with both the City of Boston as well as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. In particular, Mayor Walsh and his vision through the Imagine Boston 2030 efforts, as well as the Climate Ready Boston efforts.
Climate change is a material issue. We have increasing amounts of science. We've had the storms, which have been a wake-up call. We have an acute sense of what Hurricane Sandy would have done if it had come to Boston rather than New York. So my sense is that there is a lot of awareness and a willingness to act on this issue. And we have the resources, I think the skills to do something really significant, both in terms of climate resiliency, but also building badly needed open space along the waterfront. So this is the time, and I think we've made a good start, and now we need to execute.
As a mom of 2 young kids, the fun times that I had with my kids were in nature. Whether it is in East Boston or at the Boston Harbor Islands, we love taking the boat out to any of the islands for a picnic and to just hang around and be away from the hustle and the bustle and the noise. If we're successful, the future of Boston Waterfront will be the destination harbor. It will be the place where families make memories. It will be the place where friends and families hang out for the long weekend. It will be a bustling harbor full of life where memories are made. And it would also mean that Boston is being climate ready, and we will preserve the city of Boston, its harbor, its beautiful history for future generations.
When we think of success for our One Waterfront initiative, we imagine a whole new generation of parks on the Boston waterfront, taking condemned or underutilized spaces and opening up and reimagining them for the public. Think of a whole new generation launching kayaks, touching the water, experiencing concerts on lawns, and just really coming and meeting others from around the city. We want green space that is 100 years and lasting, and that truly rises Boston up again to being the city of landscape design. Thinking about the legacies of people like Charles Elliot, Frederick Law Olmsted, and imagining what those design spaces are for the next century. The One Waterfront initiative not only reclaims our harbor, but really lifts it up and celebrates its unique place in Boston's history.
And now, as is customary for the chair, it's my privilege to present a brief overview of some of last year's important accomplishments. Before I begin with that, however, I want to first emphasize that none of what has been achieved could have been achieved without the support of all of you. Your responsibility and your stewardship for this fine organization has always been critical to its success. So we are tonight celebrating our collective achievements. One of the first things that was achieved this year was to adopt a new 5-year strategic plan. The board of directors did this at its January meeting, and the plan, which we have titled Momentum, provides a roadmap and clear focus for our efforts. It benefited from the involvement of many of you. We listened to the voices of members, volunteers, and all levels of governance. It has 5 key strategic goals, and these goals will frame my remarks tonight. The first goal is to protect the places people love. Under this goal, we continue our core work of protecting and caring for iconic places across the Commonwealth. Gary Island was protected earlier this year, becoming the Trustees' 117th reservation. Located just off the coast of Marblehead, this 1.5-acre island with 1,800 feet of coastline is nationally significant in its own right, and serves as a wonderful complement to our neighboring property, Crown and Shield Island. Protecting Gary Island was the culmination of a 3-month campaign with great support from the local community. We're looking forward to a great party celebration next summer, ribbon cutting. Stay tuned. This could be a banner year for new reservations. Owned by the City of Boston, we hope that Mary Cummings Park in Burlington could become a trustees reservation in the very near future. We continue to push forward into our third year of working to bring this future Proxy reservation into our fold. The park constitutes one of the largest unprotected spaces in the greater Boston area. We have had important recent wins in fundraising, bringing our total raised to over $700,000 in pledges and gifts. We're also building partnerships with our neighbor in the park, Northeastern, while engaging the community through a number of successful volunteer workdays. 2 years ago, we began exploring the integration of the Decordova Sculpture Park and Museum in Lincoln. With around 100,000 visitors annually, this extraordinary museum and park, the largest of its kind in New England, it sits on a lovely 29-acre property with rolling hills and majestic trees alongside Flint Pond. A merger with Decordova would be immensely beneficial for the trustees, giving us an iconic property in an area of the state where we don't have a very strong presence, while elevating our 3-year-old art and landscape program. We signed a preliminary integration agreement last spring, but there remain some pretty significant hurdles. Most notably, we have an ambitious fundraising goal of $15 million, but I'm very pleased to report that we are already over $10 million in what we have raised. We are also in the midst of a very robust public process in Lincoln, which will culminate with a town vote in March. If all goes as planned, Decordova will be a new trustees reservation shortly thereafter. The trustees continues to advance our ambitious plans to secure a waterfront site in Boston. Our goal is to create an open and inviting waterfront parks that are emblematic of world-class landscape design with elements that will bolster our city's coastal resilience. We have focused our attention on 2 near-term opportunities: Pierce Park 3 in East Boston and Dry Dock number 4 in South Boston. To broaden awareness and to provide better understanding of our waterfront vision, the trustees has been busy on multiple fronts. In the past year, we have launched a new website titled One Waterfront to better inform the community. We have hosted our first waterfront gala to celebrate our initiative. We have convened a CEO advisory group to engage local businesses. And we have garnered a fair amount of press coverage, including 6 recent feature articles with the Boston Globe. All in all, it has been a very productive year for the waterfront. Across the state, we continue to raise our standard of care for all our properties and to make considerable progress against our stewardship and capital lists. An important new project that was the construction of the Naumkeag greenhouse, a complex that captures the charm and the character of the original structure, but is much more sustainable. The greenhouse honors the horticultural legacy of Naumkeag and completes a multi-year restoration of one of our most beloved cultural sites. The trustees has also undertaken 2 important capital projects at World's End in Hingham. One enhances vehicle circulation to reduce neighborhood congestion and improve pedestrian safety. The other is a renewal project to restore and preserve some of the most iconic Olmsted designed landscape. So that's our first goal. Our second goal under the strategic plan is to respond to a changing coast. This goal focuses a multifaceted strategy to become a leader in coastal conservation. We will work to mobilize conservation, education, advocacy, stewardship, volunteerism, all towards a more resilient coastline. Much of our recent coastal conservation has been focused on the great marsh communities on the North Shore. Our work there has been supported by a number of leadership grants, including a mass-based grant for salt marsh restoration at Old Town Hill in Newburyport. This project will help restore the marsh's ability to buffer neighboring communities from storm surge and rising sea levels. Another recent award was from the state's Coastal Zone Management Department. This grant will fund a project in partnership with the town of Ipswich to address the very vulnerable Jolla Road access to Crane Beach. In addition to ensuring public access for our 350,000 annual visitors, it will help to restore the natural salt marsh. Our advocacy this year included the trustees' active support for the state's environmental bond legislation, which allocates $1.4 billion for investments in climate change adaptation, environmental and natural resource protection, and improvements to recreational assets and opportunities. Our third goal under the strategic plan is to elevate our cultural and agricultural experiences. We continue to invest in our farms and public gardens as we have learned that this investment can prove very effective in building visitation and engagement. During our Cultural Resources campaign, we began examining 2 trustees' reservations as potential flagship properties: Stevens Coolidge Place in North Andover and Long Hill in Beverly. Our work led to the development of a multi-year plan to revitalize and uplift these 2 garden properties through restoration, better visitor amenities, and new garden features. We are very pleased to announce that we have recently received a $9.6 million grant towards the restoration and activation of these estates. This grant represents the single largest grant ever received for a cultural property. At the Farm Institute, our community farm in Edgerton, we've developed a plan for a new, more welcoming and versatile space to expand programming and engage more broadly with the seasonal and year-round vineyard community. We used a local architect who drew inspiration from trustees' kitchens at Appleton, Powysset Farm, and the Boston Public Market. In July, we celebrated the completion and opening of Windermere, the trustees' 56th community garden, which will provide garden plots and much-needed community gathering space for this Dorchester neighborhood. Our fourth goal is to invite the next generation outdoors. We must continually recruit and engage new conservationists so that the next generation carries on our work. In September, the trustees opened the doors of Moose Hill Farm to our first class of 23 preschoolers as part of a new innovative collaboration with the Sharon Cooperative School. Students at this preschool will spend at least 50% of their time outdoors. Traditional classroom learning will be enhanced by nature-based programming to foster a sense of exploration, creative expression, and discovery. We believe this will serve as a model for us around the state. We've forged new partnerships with the South Shore Nature Center and the South Shore YMCA to get more kids outdoors and into nature. Over the next 5 years, this could get 50,000 kids from the Y involved in educational programs at our Hingham reservations and beyond. Finally, our last goal is to build the trustees of the future. To be sustainable, we must work to engage more visitors, more members, more volunteers, more donors, and more happy neighbors. Members are the lifeblood of this organization, and they're a key indicator of our success. On this score, I am very pleased to report that the trustees has reached another milestone, now surpassing $5 million in membership revenue for the first time in our history. Similarly, we've seen outstanding growth in public program participation, increasing from 124,000 in 2014 to 264,000 this year. The Trustees now offers over 5,000 programs annually, all of which continue to generate a lot of enthusiasm. The Trustees, as you've heard us said, is an organization built on volunteers who provide invaluable support in almost every aspect of our work. We have successfully grown our volunteer impact over the last 5 years, and this year we are on track to continue that trend, reaching 60,000 volunteer hours, more than double the 28,000 we had in 2015. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I again want to express our sincere gratitude to all our volunteers, many of whom are here tonight. Thank you. In conclusion, it has certainly been a very busy year, and we have accomplished a lot, continuing the great work of Charles Elliot that he began 127 years ago. Yet there is still much more to be done. And as the Trustees grows, so too do the challenges we must confront. Climate change is threatening our coast. Development is encroaching on critical green space. Technology is overwhelming young minds and pulling them away from the natural world. And communities are losing connections to their history, to their cultures, and to themselves. This can all seem pretty daunting, and sometimes you can feel like you're losing ground. But the Trustees is not losing ground. We are growing. We are increasing our visitation. We are increasing our engagement. And we are increasing our membership. We are bucking these trends and headed in the right direction. And it's being achieved with a lot of hard work, new ideas, and good planning. But there is the opportunity to do much, much more. We can have a bigger impact. We have an exceptionally talented staff at the Trustees. We have dedicated, devoted volunteers, and we have great, generous supporters. You all are an amazing team, and I am privileged to be a part of it. And I look forward to building on our success, building more momentum, and building a better future for our children. And so, I would now invite Barbara to come and speak to that future. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Peter. As you know, annual meeting is one of our signature traditions. This is the space where we acknowledge our collective work and we dream about the future. And I look forward to talking with you about that in just a moment. But sadly, I want to recognize that we lost a number of friends to the Trustees in the last year. I hope you will take a moment to honor their contributions and their respective legacies of service and dedication, knowing they each pushed the mission forward. We are fortunate to have family members of these individuals with here tonight, and we want to offer our thanks for being here to remember with us and to continue their legacy. Tonight, I would like to recognize one of these leaders whose work over the course of 50 years is a foundation of my remarks for you this evening. I first met Al Creighton several years before joining the Trustees, and over the last 6, had the opportunity to spend more time with him. As a teenager, Al was invited to join a Smithsonian expedition to map out areas of British Columbia in the rugged mountains. And like many here, it fostered love of a good map and, more importantly, the passion for the outdoors. Roped in by our first staff president, Gordon Abbott, Al's passion for land conservation began in Manchester, soon stretched to Essex County and statewide in a number of leadership positions, including becoming a Life Trustee in 1990, a Charles Eliot Award winner in 2000, and serving on the Chairman's Council for more than 42 years. His son, Peter, once told me that when his mother would call her husband to the dinner table, Al would yell, "One more deed, Hillary, start without me." And indeed, he would then share the story of new land protection underway with his teenage sons over the dinner table. By the time I had arrived at the trustees, his board service had concluded, but his passion for conservation had continued to grow. He once shared with me a fond memory of hiking Monument Mountain, where he came across two teenagers experiencing it for the first time. Al stopped and engaged the boys and gave them a primer on conservation. He explained that it took the work of many to provide this mountain to them for free, and Al, even after so many years of his own service, was always humbled by the generosity of people to protect open space and wanted it understood and cherished by all. He was an early believer of urban conservation, as much as he enjoyed the more rural rolling hills. He was an advocate for open space in Holyoke, where the population looked entirely different, and he facilitated trustees' major investments in the Pioneer Valley, which brought a young woman we all admire, Jocelyn Forbush, into the organization. He was quite proud that a woman would show the men how land conservation got done. And together, they achieved much conservation work in this new region. Al believed in projects like Mary Cummings Park and Haskell Public Gardens in New Bedford, providing an oasis in underserved areas. Amos Hostetter, tonight, joins Al as a Charles Eliot Award winner for similar ideals. Al was a believer in our focus on Boston, in the community garden work, in the open space agenda, and a more visible profile for trustees in our capital city. Because at the end of the day, Al believed quite strongly that if we were only about the rural gems, the cherished and quiet spaces out west or up north, then there wouldn't be enough teenagers outside. This concern is shared by all of us and is a driving agenda in our newly released plan, where we will use charismatic fauna, locally grown hops and lawn games, 300 pumpkins on a trail, and even a hot air balloon created by a globally renowned artist to bring people closer to nature. And that is why tonight's remarks will turn our attention to one singular and high-profile agenda of our strategic plan, and that is our work in the capital city. Our work in Boston can be a very polarizing agenda for people. I receive letters in the mailbag from members applauding our efforts to do more in the city. Scores and scores of people I will never meet write positive comments on Boston Globe articles. The praise carries statewide. From cocktail parties at Naumkeag to town meetings in Lincoln, it is what I get asked about. Is it true that Trustees is saving the Boston waterfront? Go Trustees! Who else but you guys? How thankful we are that you are bringing leadership to this area. And of course, there are the critics and the worriers. Why all this emphasis on the city? Why put all this energy into one place, an expensive one at that? Or the appropriate question, what happens if you fail? To which the thought always passes in my mind, oh, but what if we succeed? So tonight we take a journey through Boston for the advocate, for the critic, for the historian, for the dreamer, and remember how it is that the Trustees of Reservations became so focused on Boston. So we go all the way back to the beginning, and that is the beginning before the beginning of the Trustees, and a letter written by Charles Eliot in January 1890 that was the origin of his thinking around our founding. It is everywhere agreed that a great and growing population, such as now inhabits Boston and her wide-spreading suburbs, should, for its own best health, provide itself with all possible open spaces. Boston is far behind in this matter. Large areas outside of the old city are wholly unprovided with public open spaces. Boston, like New York, may yet be compelled to tear down whole blocks of buildings to provide herself with the needed oasis of light and air. Elliot continues, "The providing of what I call parks is necessary for the preservation of the civilization of cities. It is an influence which has a most peculiar value as an antidote to the struggling and excitement of city life. What can we do to satisfy the need to be close to nature that burns within us?" End quote. Eliot penned this letter 10 years after the first national studies on parks was published and 26 cities nationwide were studied. Boston was last on the list for quality park space in 1880, even though by that time we had the Public Garden, the Common, the Arnold Arboretum. Boston was last on the list. This was an embarrassment to a city that saw itself worthy of the global stage. To be far behind international cities like London and Paris, and even places like St. Louis and Baltimore, was of disappointment to Boston's elite. And thus the Trustees of Reservations were formed to quell the ills of a growing Boston, to provide access to special places that stir the soul, to serve our health, to elevate society, for Boston, for everyone. With us, the idea of holding land for public benefit was launched. The need for better city planning that incorporated open spaces was developed. Park commissions and agencies to serve our residents were created. It is important to remember that the national trend in parks in the 19th century was all about parks on a city's edge. Think Central Park, for example, the retreat from the city. So it is not a surprise that we began acquiring country parks throughout Massachusetts, while the city was commissioning similar country parks in Boston shortly after our founding. And parks began to flourish statewide. Franklin Park, 1885, the banks of the Charles River, 1910, now known today as the Esplanade. By 1920, Boston had successfully grown from 171 acres to 2,330, managed by the city of Boston. And then in the 20th century, the park aesthetic changes. And that is, people desire a retreat not at the edge, but an active space within. Rose Kennedy Greenway, all of this progress. But in 1970, 80, 90, even 2000, the city holds fast at 2,330 acres. Today, it owns 2,346 acres of parkland, just 16 more acres than in 1920. Economic progress and densification over this period caused a great diminishment of Boston's natural assets. For every park added, space was lost elsewhere. The Boston Redevelopment Authority in 1976 recorded, "In the last 100 years, an estimated 6,000 acres of coastal wetlands within the inner portion of Boston Harbor have been destroyed. Over half of the city's wetlands have been lost. Salt marsh is a rare resource in our city today." I can say two things about this. First, it's important to remember that Boston has gained much prosperity from development of these lost places, and that prosperity has benefited communities all over Massachusetts, including those served by the trustees. Second, when I found this entry by the BRA, I can tell you I was really excited that someone in the agency in 1976 cared about salt marsh. In times of growth, there can be an extraction of resources provided by open space, and it's not been a pretty time for parks. And that national list of open space in the US that angered Elliot in 1890, Boston has moved up to number 13. beating out St. Louis, but behind Madison, Wisconsin, spending just 40% of what San Francisco does on its parks, and barely equal with Las Vegas and Tampa, Florida, for park acreage available by resident. Thus, our re-entry back into Boston in the early 2000s was not a surprise. Boston was returning to a population that it hadn't been since the 1960s. Open space protection was not moving the needle enough, barely adding back what was being developed. This caused much concern for us, leading to a 2005 board discussion titled Establishing a Boston Presence, and focused on several possibilities to grow special places in the city. Just a few of the remarks to summarize this intense debate. Nick Noon observed that this was a 21st century move by trustees to fulfill its mission. Peter Madsen stated that in order to save the irreplaceable for everyone forever, a huge coalition of supporters needs to be built. Former board chair Sid Smithers, if you aren't focused on Boston, then the work achieved in Berkshires is irrelevant. And thus the affiliation of Boston Natural Areas Network on June 15, 2005 was voted, marrying the mission that cared about iconic open space with the organization with a track record of serving Boston residents. Flash forward to today. Here is a picture of our work in Boston. 56 community gardens involving 17,000 people a year. Following the 2012 merger of the South End Lower Roxbury Open Space Trust, we become caretakers for 37 acres in the city. We help found the Boston Public Market and now deliver educational programs to over 20,000 people annually in the kitchen. We provide our farm produce to 6 neighborhoods served by our new mobile market. We celebrate employment of over 1,500 Boston youth in our workforce development program. And finally, 60 years later, a return to Boston as headquarters of the Trustees of Reservations. Not bad for a decade's worth of focus, but I know you agree it is simply not enough. And it's not just for lack of open space, which we can agree is a problem to be solved. It's for what we know Boston must be, a priority for a world-class organization in a world-class city in a world-class state. Our capital is benefiting from an enviable, healthy economic bubble, and consequently a booming real estate market with 13% more housing units in the last decade, much of this on the water. When Amos was founding Cablevision, his office was surrounded by a desolate part of the city, now vibrant. The seaport was no man's land, now a full commercial center, a new Boston within Boston. There have been improvements in the public realm that make the Boston waterfront more accessible and experiences in nature more available. And yet, for all this progress, the city with a booming Boston harbor and a peaceful Charles River waterfront doesn't even make one of the many lists for top waterfront cities. BBC, Travel and Leisure, Forbes, Frommer's, and more, not even on the list. So what cities are on this list? European destinations? Baltimore, Chicago, Seattle. All because they share a common thread of beautiful and accessible coastline, stunning views, multiple options for recreation, and community engagement along the water. And nature, nature, nature. So who cares about rankings? Perhaps this one will be of interest. One list we are on the top of is the most vulnerable cities on the coast, where we land the number 2 spot. Other cities are investing in beautiful waterfronts, and even more important, they are driving green infrastructure and new parks to support resilient waterfronts. If Crane Beach is experiencing ice boulders, what happens to a city built on old salt flats and walls of concrete? This, my friends, is not about climate change. It's about this, or this, or this. Flooding in Boston has become a regular occurrence, 25 days last year. Sea level rise is happening here in Boston, and it's affecting a vulnerable waterfront that holds so much responsibility for Boston and the Commonwealth's economic, social health, and its centuries-long ambition to be the world-class city on the hill. Let me just lay out the scenario upon us. A challenged city parks budget and limited acreage added in the last 50 years. Increased densification of people and infrastructure, a vibrant economy in the city that drives the health of the whole state, and an inevitable vulnerability to climate change. So what role is there for our organization at this moment? As the nation's oldest, the state's largest entity created to provide nature and culture for people, what can we do as the entity with deep experience in caring for coastline, in engaging the public, in providing parks for everyone forever? We embody what Trustees has always done and respond to the need for leadership, the call to action. We create the opportunity for solutions where others can't or won't. Just like Elliot and Olmsted were our 19th century leaders in drawing upon the inspiration of other magnificent cities by creating retreats from city life, so can we today. And of course, there are risks, reputational, financial, time and energy. But the examples of success, my friends, are out there, of entities like ours, in cities like ours, reimagining land like ours, and in just recent years. Beautiful creations with innovative funding models, providing climate resilience, promoting public access, resilient, sustainable, open, accessible, world-class. The same values we bring to all of the 120 miles of waterfront in our care. This is what we want for the old residents of East Boston or the new neighbors of South Boston. This is what we want for the place that was our beginning and the places of our future. After 3 years of our One Waterfront initiative, we have the needed ingredients. There is public will, a mayor's commitment to new parks and better climate solutions, all the visionary leaders needed, philanthropic, civic, corporate, and nonprofit, and places to be reimagined. All of our work begun here and across the Commonwealth for the last 127 years prepares us for this monumental task. This is how we can satisfy the need for nature that burns within us. We aspire to raise unprecedented contributions, to broker the most complicated land deals we've ever done, to negotiate bureaucratic red tape, to conceive new levels of engagement, to dream, to grow, to stretch the organization, because in the end, the entire organization will be lifted to new heights. From one point, many streams will converge. Al Creighton's service, Amos Hostetter's dedication, the collective passion and work in this room, all for the same idea. We hope to protect our world for today, for tomorrow, for our children's children, in Boston, in cities, in towns and communities across the Commonwealth. And that, at the end of the day, is what parks are for. Thank you for being on this journey with us. Good evening.
Well, thank you very much, Barbara, for outlining our goals and aspirations in such a wonderful way. If there is no other business to come before the meeting, then is there a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.